In the heart of the savannah, where silence hides dangers and every shadow could mean death, a young buffalo calf walked beside its mother under the scorching sun that made the air heavy and suffocating. The wind carried dust across the dry, cracked ground where vegetation struggled to survive through the endless, rainless days that dragged on across the African plains. The herd had stopped to rest near an area with some dry, thorny bushes, and it was precisely in this moment of carelessness that the predator had been waiting with the patience of an experienced hunter who knows every detail of that territory. From a distance, hidden among the flickering shadows of the acacia trees, the cheetah watched the defenseless calf with fixed, concentrated eyes, calculating every step, every movement, every breath of the small buffalo, grazing innocently without noticing the deadly danger approaching silently. For her, this wasn't just a common hunt like those that happen every day in the African savannah. It was pure survival. It was the chance to guarantee energy and food, to stay alive for a few more days in that hostile and unforgiving environment where only the strongest and most adapted can thrive and pass their genes forward. Her cubs waited hidden among the rocks miles away, hungry and completely dependent on her success in this hunt that could change everything. The cheetah knew that buffalo calf represented days of feeding and the difference between life and death for her own offspring. She studied the terrain, analyzed the position of the other adult buffaloes in the herd, and noticed that the calf was just a few meters too far away from its mother, who was chewing grass, distracted. It was now or never. The perfect moment had arrived, and she couldn't waste this rare opportunity. Her muscles contracted under her spotted skin, preparing for the explosion of speed that made her the fastest land animal on the planet, capable of reaching over 60 miles per hour in just a few seconds. Her breathing accelerated, her heart pumped adrenaline through her veins, and every fiber of her body prepared for the deadly attack that was about to happen on that hot, dusty afternoon in the savannah, where the law of the strongest reigned absolute, without mercy or clemency for the weak and inattentive who let their guard down even for a single fatal second. With a burst that was almost invisible to the human eye, the cheetah broke through the dust line, like lightning crossing the distance between predator and prey in a matter of heartbeats. The dry ground exploded under her powerful paws as she accelerated with deadly precision, her spotted coat blending with the golden landscape, making her look like a ghost of death materializing from nowhere. The young buffalo calf only had time to lift its head in confusion before the brutal impact knocked the air from its small lungs and sent shockwaves through its entire body. The cheetah hit the calf with the full weight of her body, using momentum and speed to knock the young buffalo off balance and onto the dusty ground. Her sharp claws dug into the fragile skin of the calf that struggled desperately to stay on its feet and escape the grip of death that had caught it by surprise. The calf's eyes went wide with terror and pain as it felt the predator's weight crushing down and the burning sensation of claws piercing its flesh, while the world seemed to spin around in a cloud of dust and confusion. The young buffalo let out a weak, desperate call that was almost swallowed by the rumbling sound of hooves pounding the earth and the heavy breathing of the cheetah trying to finish what she had started. That sound, however weak and fragile as it was, cut through the hot African air like a knife and reached the ears of the one creature that would stop at nothing to answer it. The mother buffalo, who had been grazing just meters away, suddenly froze as that distress call hit her like a physical blow. Every maternal instinct in her massive body ignited at once, flooding her system with a primal fury that overrode any sense of self-preservation or caution. She turned her head and saw the nightmare unfolding before her eyes, her precious calf trapped under the spotted predator, struggling and crying out for help that seemed too far away. In that split second, Something shifted in the atmosphere of the savannah, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next in this deadly confrontation between predator and prey, between hunger and love, between survival and sacrifice. The mother buffalo didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second, as pure maternal rage took control of her massive body and transformed her from a peaceful herbivore into a charging force of nature that nothing could stop. Her hooves exploded against the ground with such force that the earth trembled beneath her weight as she launched herself forward with a determination that defied every natural instinct of fear that should have made her run away from the deadly predator. Her curved horns gleamed under the intense sunlight, like polished weapons forged specifically for this moment of reckoning that would decide the fate of her precious offspring. The cheetah was so focused on trying to drag the struggling calf away that she didn't notice the approaching danger until it was almost too late to react. She had the young buffalo by the neck, trying to find the killing grip that would end the struggle quickly and allow her to feed her own starving cubs, waiting miles away in their hidden den. But the ground was vibrating now with increasing intensity, and a deep rumbling sound was growing louder with every passing second as the mother buffalo closed the distance between them with terrifying speed. When the cheetah finally looked up and saw the massive buffalo charging straight at her with murder in her eyes and fury in every pounding step, it felt like time itself slowed down to a crawl. The predator's survival instincts screamed at her to let go and run, but her hunger and desperation made her hesitate for just one more second, trying to decide if she could still drag the calf to safety before the mother reached them. That single second of hesitation nearly cost her everything, as the mother buffalo was now just meters away, closing in like a freight train made of muscle horn and unstoppable maternal love. The cheetah's golden eyes met the buffalo's dark, rage-filled gaze, and in that instant she understood that this was no longer about hunting or feeding her cubs. This had become a battle for survival, where she was no longer the hunter but the hunted, and where her speed and agility would be tested against the raw power and determination of a mother who would gladly die to save her child from the jaws of death that had dared to touch what was hers to protect. The cheetah made her decision in a heartbeat and released the calf from her grip, just as the mother buffalo's massive head came crashing toward her like a battering ram aimed directly at her ribcage. She twisted her flexible body to the side with the lightning-fast reflexes that only a cat possesses, and managed to avoid the full force of the charge. But the buffalo's horns still grazed her shoulder, sending a sharp jolt of pain through her entire body. The impact threw her off balance, and she stumbled sideways, raising a massive cloud of dust that momentarily hid both predator and prey from each other's view. The young calf scrambled to its feet, coughing and gasping for air, with blood trickling from the puncture wounds on its neck and shoulder, where the cheetah's claws had dug deep into its flesh. Its legs were shaking and wobbly from the shock and trauma, but the overwhelming instinct to survive pushed it forward as it tried to distance itself from the chaos unfolding around it. Every muscle in its small body screamed with pain, but fear gave it strength it didn't know it had, as it stumbled toward where it hoped safety might be waiting. The mother buffalo didn't stop after her first charge, but instead pivoted with surprising agility for such a large animal, and positioned herself between her wounded calf and the predator, creating a living barrier of muscle and horn. Her nostrils flared as she breathed heavily, her chest heaving with exertion and adrenaline, while her eyes never left the cheetah, who was now circling at a safer distance, trying to assess whether continuing this fight was worth the risk. A deep, threatening sound rumbled from the mother's throat, warning the predator that any attempt to approach her calf again would be met with even greater violence. The cheetah was panting heavily now, her tongue hanging out as she tried to cool her overheated body while calculating her next move with the cold logic of a predator who had to balance hunger against survival. She was hungry, her cubs were hungry, and that calf represented days of food that could mean the difference between life and death for her family. But the mother buffalo was a wall of fury standing between her and that meal, and the cheetah's shoulder throbbed where the horn had grazed her, reminding her that she was no longer dealing with helpless prey. The cheetah took a few cautious steps forward, testing the mother buffalo's resolve, and looking for any opening that might allow her to dart in and grab the wounded calf that was still within striking distance. Her predatory instincts pushed her to try one more time to take advantage of the calf's injuries and weakened state before the rest of the herd noticed the commotion and came running to join the defense. She crouched low, her body coiled like a spring, ready to explode into action at the slightest sign of opportunity or weakness in the mother's defensive stance. But the mother buffalo wasn't backing down even an inch, and her message was crystal clear through every tense muscle in her powerful body. She lowered her head, bringing those deadly curved horns to bear directly at the cheetah, while taking a threatening step forward that made the predator instinctively back up to maintain a safe distance. The buffalo's eyes burned with a fierce, protective love that was more dangerous than any weapon nature could have given her, because it meant she was willing to fight to the death without hesitation or retreat, no matter what the cost to herself might be. The standoff continued for several long, tense seconds that felt like hours, as both animals stared each other down, neither willing to make the first move in this deadly game of chicken. The dust settled around them, revealing the small patches of blood on the ground where the calf had fallen and struggled under the cheetah's attack. The young buffalo had managed to limp a few more meters away and was now calling out weakly to its mother while trying to process the trauma of nearly becoming another predator's meal in the unforgiving cycle of life and death that ruled the savanna. Other members of the herd had finally noticed the disturbance, and several large adult buffaloes were now trotting toward the scene with their heads raised and ears forward, trying to understand what threat had provoked such aggression from one of their own. The cheetah saw them coming and knew that her window of opportunity was closing rapidly, because facing one angry mother buffalo was dangerous enough, but facing an entire herd of these massive animals would be nothing short of suicide, even for the most desperate predator. The cheetah's mind raced as she weighed her options with the cold calculation that every predator must master to survive in the brutal world of the African savanna. Her stomach was empty, her cubs were hungry, and she had already invested precious energy in this hunt that had gone terribly wrong the moment that Mother Buffalo decided to fight back with such ferocious determination. But now, with reinforcements arriving and her shoulder aching from the glancing blow, she had to face the harsh reality that this meal was no longer worth the risk of serious injury or death. She took one last look at the wounded calf that represented everything she needed but could no longer have, and something shifted in her golden eyes as survival instinct finally overrode hunting instinct. The cheetah slowly began to back away, maintaining eye contact with the mother buffalo to avoid appearing weak or triggering a chase response that could end badly for her. Every step backward was an admission of defeat, but also a choice to live, to hunt another day, when circumstances might be more favorable and prey more vulnerable to her lightning-fast attacks. The mother buffalo watched the predator retreat with unwavering focus, never relaxing her defensive posture or letting her guard down for even a moment. She knew that predators could be unpredictable, and that a desperate cheetah might still try one last desperate lunge if she sensed any weakness or opportunity. Her massive body remained tense and ready, her hooves planted firmly in the dusty ground while her horns stayed pointed at the spotted cat, like twin spears waiting to impale anything foolish enough to approach her injured calf. As the distance between them grew wider, the cheetah finally turned and began to trot away with her tail low, and her body language broadcasting defeat to anyone who understood the subtle signals of savanna communication. She didn't run at full speed, because that would show fear and possibly invite pursuit from the arriving buffalo reinforcements, but she moved with purpose, putting distance between herself and the confrontation that had cost her energy, time, and possibly her only good hunting opportunity of the day. The other buffalo adults arrived in a thunder of hooves and surrounded the mother and her wounded calf, forming a protective circle of massive bodies that no predator would dare to challenge. They snorted and pawed at the ground, sending up small clouds of dust while scanning the area for any remaining threats that might be lurking in the tall grass or behind the scattered acacia trees. The herd's protective instinct had kicked in, and now the young calf was surrounded by tons of muscle and horn that would defend it with their lives if necessary. The mother buffalo finally allowed herself to relax slightly now that reinforcements had arrived and the immediate danger had passed into the shimmering heat waves of the afternoon. She turned to her calf and began to inspect the wounds on its neck and shoulder, using her rough tongue to clean the blood and dirt from the puncture marks left by the cheetah's claws. The young buffalo trembled under her touch, still processing the trauma of being so close to death and feeling the burning pain of its injuries with every breath it took. The calf pressed close to its mother's side, seeking comfort and safety in her massive presence, while its legs continued to shake from exhaustion and shock. It had learned a brutal lesson that day about the dangers of wandering too far from the herd and letting its guard down even for a moment, in a world where death could strike faster than lightning from the tall grass. The experience would stay with it forever, making it more cautious and aware of its surroundings as it grew into adulthood in the unforgiving landscape of the savanna. Meanwhile, the cheetah had stopped about 50 meters away and sat down heavily in the shade of a thorny bush to catch her breath and lick her wounded shoulder where the buffalo's horn had scraped away fur and skin. She was exhausted, hungry, and disappointed, but still alive, which was more than many predators could say after challenging a protective mother buffalo. Her ribs showed clearly through her spotted coat, testament to the many days without a successful kill and the constant energy demands of feeding herself and her growing cubs. The cheetah knew she would have to try again soon because her cubs couldn't wait much longer without food, and their desperate cries echoed in her mind even from miles away. She rested in the shade, watching the buffalo herd from a distance and committing this painful lesson to memory so she would know better next time about the risks of targeting calves when their mothers were close enough to intervene. Every scar, every failed hunt, and every close call with death was a teacher in the harsh school of survival, where graduation meant living another day. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the buffalo herd started to move again, with the wounded calf walking close to its mother's side, never straying more than a few feet from her protective presence. The other adults formed a loose formation around them, creating a mobile fortress that moved across the plains toward a watering hole where they could drink and rest for the night. The young buffalo limped slightly, favoring its injured shoulder, but it was alive, and that was all that mattered in the grand scheme of survival. The mother buffalo kept glancing back at her calf every few steps, making sure it was keeping up and watching for any signs that its injuries might be worse than they appeared. Her maternal instincts remained on high alert, even as the immediate danger faded into memory, because she knew the savanna was full of predators who specialized in picking off the weak, the injured, and the vulnerable. Lions, hyenas, and even crocodiles at the water's edge would see her wounded calf as an easy target if she let her guard down for even a moment. Back under the thorny bush, the cheetah finally stood up and shook the dust from her coat before beginning the long walk back to her den, where her cubs waited with empty bellies and hopeful eyes. She would have to hunt again before darkness fell completely, because nighttime belonged to the lions and leopards, who could see and hunt in conditions where her speed advantage meant nothing. The pressure of being a single mother in the world's most competitive hunting ground weighed heavily on her thin shoulders. The cheetah moved through the golden grass, with her head low and her spirits even lower, knowing that she would have to explain her failure to her cubs in the only way she could, by returning empty-handed and hungry. They would cry and beg for food, rubbing against her and searching desperately for milk that had long since dried up because she hadn't eaten enough to produce it anymore. The guilt of not being able to provide for them gnawed at her almost as painfully as the hunger in her own belly. She thought about the risks she had taken and wondered if she should have held on just a few seconds longer, or if letting go had been the right choice that saved her life. In the savannah, there were no second chances for injured predators, because an injury meant slower speed, and slower speed meant starvation and death. She had seen other cheetahs disappear over the years, limping away after failed hunts or fights with other predators never to be seen again. Their cubs usually died within days, either from starvation or from being killed by lions and hyenas who saw them as competition. As she approached her den, hidden among a pile of large boulders that provided shade and protection from the elements, she could already hear the high-pitched mewing of her 3 cubs who had caught her scent on the wind. They came tumbling out of the rocky shelter with their oversized paws, and spotted fur looking so innocent and trusting that it broke her heart to disappoint them once again. They swarmed around her legs, purring and chirping in their unique cheetah way, while searching for food that wasn't there. The mother cheetah lay down heavily and allowed her cubs to nurse even though there was barely any milk left to give them. They pulled and kneaded at her belly, growing increasingly frustrated and distressed when they realized she had brought nothing back from her hunt. The smallest cub let out a pitiful cry that cut through her like a knife, reminding her that tomorrow she would have to try again. And this time, failure simply wasn't an option if she wanted to keep all 3 of her babies alive through the coming days. As darkness began to settle over the savannah like a heavy blanket, the cheetah made a silent promise to herself and to her cubs that she would find food tomorrow, no matter what it took. She would wake before dawn when the air was cool and hunt with every ounce of strength she had left in her lean body. Perhaps she would target smaller prey like hares or young gazelles that didn't have protective mothers willing to risk everything to save them. The memory of that buffalo mother's fury would stay with her forever, as both a warning and a strange kind of respect for the universal bond between mothers and their young. On the other side of the plains, the buffalo herd had settled down for the night, forming a defensive circle, with the calves and injured members safe in the center, surrounded by the massive bodies of the adults. The young calf that had survived the cheetah attack lay pressed against its mother's warm flank, finally able to rest after the most terrifying experience of its short life. The wounds on its neck and shoulder throbbed with pain, but they would heal in time, leaving only scars as reminders of the day it almost became prey. The mother buffalo remained alert even as exhaustion pulled at her eyelids, because maternal vigilance never truly sleeps in a world full of dangers that hunt under cover of darkness. She had saved her calf today through sheer courage and determination, proving that sometimes love and fury combined can overcome even the fastest predator on earth. Her hooves were sore from the chase, and her muscles ached from the adrenaline that had flooded her system, but none of that mattered compared to the precious life sleeping safely beside her. And so another day ended in the eternal cycle of the African savanna, where predators and prey lived out their roles in nature's grand drama of survival. The cheetah would hunt again, and the buffalo would defend again, because that was the way of things in a land where every sunrise brought new challenges, and every sunset marked another victory for those strong enough, clever enough, or lucky enough to see it. In this harsh but beautiful world, there were no villains and no heroes, only mothers trying to keep their babies alive in the face of impossible odds. And that was perhaps the most powerful force in all of nature.